Hi, everybody, and welcome to TGCS. My name is Tim Gallagher, and today we are going to be discussing AP Computer Science A topic 410, implementing ArrayList algorithms. And in this first of two videos, we'll develop code for some standard and original algorithms and determine the result of these algorithms. Now, we have a lot of algorithms to cover. So for this video, we're going to focus on these three algorithms. First, we're going to look at determining a maximum or minimum value in an array list. Next, we'll compute a sum or average of values in an array list. And then finally, we'll determine the elements in an array list that have a particular property. All right, now before we get into the algorithms, let's talk about what we need to think about when developing algorithms. So when we're implementing these array list algorithms, first, we want to make sure we know what's our goal. Do we need to get a value or maybe a location in the array list, or returning a calculation, maybe a particular object? What result do we want to get out of the method that we're writing itself? Next, we really need to know what kind of objects are in the array list. Can we compare them? Can we accumulate them? Can we check an attribute or maybe compare some individual elements? And then finally, when we're looking at the algorithm as a whole, do we need to traverse the entire array list? Could we possibly halt our traversal maybe part of the way through? What are going to be the conditions that we halt our algorithm before traversing anything? Or maybe we always have to traverse the entire array list. All right, so for these algorithms, we're going to use the college class. So if you remember, we did this back in video 4.6. We read from a data file and we loaded all this college data. It was ranking colleges from 2022. And we created a college class that had these 16 instance variables that were attributes of every institution that we loaded from that data file. So if you recall, we have these 16 variables, and we also had the 16 accessor methods. Here's some of them, and here's the other methods, and they're going to be returning the values from our college object that we create. So here's our program that we're going to use to implement our array list algorithms. So first, it's called institution list. So I have public class institution list. And the first thing I do in here is create an array list of college objects called schools. Of course, I have a constructor. The purpose of our constructor is to initialize our instance variables. So I say school equals new array list of colleges. And then I've got a method to load my data file. Now, we'll go over this briefly, but if you want more information about exactly how loading the data file works, look back at the 4.6 video. We go into a lot of details and break down exactly how we're reading that file. But let's go ahead and look at this method just a little bit here. So we know we're going to create a file object and create a scanner object based on that file name. And then we'll skip the header row. And while there are still lines to read in the file, I read each line. And this is a comma separated values file. So we're going to then split each string that I read from the file using the comma into an array of strings called values. And then we're going to take all 16 of those values from the values array and put them into some local variables, which I will then use to construct my college object. And we'll do this over and over again for each line of my data file. And so I'm going to have, I believe it was 498 different objects in my array list, because if you look at the last line of the load data file, I've got schools.add a college, with a college being the college object that I just created from that line of data within my data file. So now by the time this method is done executing, I have 498 different college objects loaded into my array list. All right, let's now look at some of the methods we're going to write to implement our array list algorithms. All right, the first one is finding a minimum or maximum value. And we're going to write a method called get largest student population. And this method, as it says, will return the college object with the largest total student population. So let's think about what it is we're going to need to do and kind of put some comments in here to outline our algorithm before we write any code. So one of the things I'm going to do first is let's go ahead and check to make sure the array list is empty. In other examples, we've had preconditions, maybe that we know the array list is populated or the array is populated, but just for here, let's consider the possibility that the array list might be empty. If it's not, let's continue. Then what are we going to do? Well, we're going to assume that the first school has the largest population. So we'll save the first school as our largest college so far. Then we'll want to loop through all the remaining schools, and we'll have to go through the entire array list because we can't stop early. There may be a large college further down the list. And we're going to check to see if the current school has a larger population than what I thought was the largest up to this point. If that school does have a larger student population, well, then that college becomes our new college with the largest population. After we're done looping through everything, then we're going to return the largest, which will be a school or a college object from our array list. All right. So remember a couple of things when writing this algorithm. We have an array list of colleges called schools. That's my private instance variable that we're going to use. Also, there is a accessor method in the college class called getTotalStudentPop, which allows us to retrieve the total student population from my college object. So if you'd like, go ahead and take a moment here, pause this video, and see if you can write the code to implement the algorithm that we just outlined. Ready? All right, let's go over it together here. So first of all, I want to check if the array list is empty. If it is, if schools.size, remember, size is the method that tells us if there's anything in the array list. And we learned from some previous videos that it'll return 0 if the array list is empty. So if it's empty, well, then I'm just going to return null because there is no maximum or minimum college. Something to consider. Okay, assume the first school has the largest population. So save that as my largest. So I'm going to have to construct or create a college object here called largest. And then I'm going to call schools.getZero, which will put the first school in my list into the largest college variable. Now I want to loop through the remaining schools and compare it to my largest. Now notice I started this loop at I equals 1. If you forget you start at 0, it's not going to hurt anything. It'll just compare it against itself, right? So I'm going to loop through all the rest of the schools, I less than schools.size, I plus plus. And then I'm going to check each one of the schools in my array list by using schools.getI .get total student population. And if the total student population of that current school is greater than the population of what I think is my current largest school, well, then I have a new largest. So what do I have to do? I have to assign schools.getI to my largest college variable. And then after I'm done with traversing through the entire array list and I've compared all the different schools, well, now I can return largest because that's the largest school on my array list. How'd you do? All right, great. Let's look at another method. Here we go. We're going to compute a sum or an average. And in this case, we're going to write a method called getAveragePublicStudentFaculty ratio, which is a long title. But we're going to calculate and return the average student to faculty ratio for public schools within a particular region. And we're going to use the parameter region so that we can run this for different regions of the country and find out what their average student to faculty ratio is amongst the public schools in that area. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to loop through all the schools, right? And we're going to check to see if a school is public and if it's in the region specified by our parameter. Well, if it is, we're going to need to add the total ratios and the number of schools to some sort of variable. So it looks like I'm going to have to keep track of those somehow, maybe have some variables that I can use to hold these values. After the loop is done, well, then I want to make sure that if I didn't find any schools, make sure I have to avoid divided by 0, but then I'll return the average. And how do we calculate the average? That's something to think about as well. Once again, here are some things that are available to us. We do have an array list of colleges called schools. That's my instance variable in the institution list class that I have. And these 3 methods of the college class are going to be helpful as well. The get college type, which will be our public or private or any other type of university, the get region, and the get student faculty ratio. We're going to need all these to write this method. So go ahead and pause here if you like, and come back in just a moment and we will look at the code together. All right, ready? Here we go. So First, as I mentioned briefly, we're going to need a couple of variables to use to hold our total and also count the number of colleges that we find that actually match that criteria. So we're going to loop through all the schools. Here, I've used a for each loop. So for each college, I'll call it C within my schools. Let's check to see if the school is public. So I'm going to say if C.getCollegeType dot equals public, I got to use the dot equals method because we're comparing strings. And if C.getRegion dot equals, and I'm comparing it to the region parameter that I have. If both of those are true, and I use an and, not an or, because I want it to be public and within that region. Well, then what do? Well, let's add the student faculty ratio to my total, C.get student faculty ratio, and increase count by 1 because I need to keep track of how many of these schools that I discovered. Finally, after the loop is done, we want to return the average, but you got to be careful here. Maybe there are no public schools in a particular region. So I want to make sure that if my count is 0, I'm going to just return 0 because I don't want to have a division by 0 exception. Then I'm going to return, assuming that it's okay, that it's not 0, I'm going to return total divided by count. Now notice my total is a double. So because the student to faculty ratio is also a double in my college class, and this returns a double. So I don't have to worry about casting, or I don't have to worry about rounding or doing integer division or something like that because I am using double division here. How'd you do? All right, one more to go before we test our methods out and see if they actually work. Let's determine if the certain elements in an array list have a particular property. And in this case, we have a method called getStateSchools, which given a state, I'm going to return an array list of all of the colleges that are in a particular state. So let's look at the algorithm. So first of all, because what am I returning? I'm returning an array list, not a particular college. So I'm going to need to construct a new array list to hold all of these colleges that I find. Then we're going to traverse our original list of colleges and loop through and then check to see if any of the colleges are in a particular state. If they are, well, then we're going to add it to our new array list that we just created. After we're done looping and traversing through our entire array list, we're going to return the new array list, which contains all of the schools that are located in that particular state. Again, here are some methods we have available to us. We have, well, first of all, the array list of schools called array list of colleges called schools. And then we have a public string get state method found in our college class. So go ahead and pause this video, take a shot, and we'll look at a solution together. All right, here we go. So first thing I'm going to do is create this new array list. I called it state list because it's a list of colleges within a particular state. It's an array list of colleges. Notice we also have to construct it equals new array list college. So now we have an empty array list ready to add schools to. So I'm going to loop through. I use a traditional for loop here in this case, but I could have used a for each loop as well. For every, I'm going to look at I equals 0, I less than schools.size, I plus plus. I'm going to say schools.getI dot get state. And if that dot equals the state parameter, that's a lot to say, right? It's schools.getI dot get state dot equal state. Whenever we string a lot of those method calls together, it can get confusing. But make sure we know that we're calling the right methods on the right objects. Schools is an array list, so I can call the get method. Well, the get method gives me back a college object, so I can call a get state method on the college object, which gets me back a string, so I can call the dot equals method to compare it against my state parameter. Whew. That's a lot. All right. If that's true, if I found a school within the state that I'm looking for, I want to add it to my array list. So I'm going to do a state list.add, and then in the parameters, schools.getI. So I'm going to take my current college and add it to my state list. After my loop is done, we'll return the state list. How'd you do? Okay, let's test these out. So here I've got a new program called institution tester. And in here I have a public static void main string args. Notice that my main does do a throws IO exception because I am doing some file IO here, and we want to make sure that we have that, we need that throws IO exception because of the file IO process that I'm doing here in the load data file message. So method. So first, I'm going to construct an institution list object. So I have an institution list called colleges equals new institution list. I'm then going to call colleges.load data file to load in my CSV data file. And again, more details on what that looks like back in video 4.6. And now we'll print out our college data analysis. So the first thing we did was, well, let's find the school with the largest student population. So I call colleges.get largest student population. I store that in a variable called largest. If it's not null, because we had checked to make sure that there was colleges in that list, well, then I'm going to print out the college with the largest student population and just print out largest. And there is a toString method, so it'll print out all the details of that particular institution. Next, I'm going to test out the get average public student faculty ratio for a region. The first one, I'm going to set region equal to Northeast, and then I'm going to print out whatever I get back, my average ratio in a couple of print line statements. And then I'm going to call it again, but this time I'm going to use the region as South. So I can compare what are the student faculty ratios in two different regions for the public universities in that region. And then finally, I want to find out all the state schools in a particular state. I'm going to choose Florida because that's where I'm at. So I'm going to call colleges.getStateSchools, and I'm going to send it FL, the two-letter abbreviation for Florida, stored in my own ArrayList variable that I called Florida schools. And then, as long as the size isn't 0, I'm going to loop through all of the Florida schools. And then notice I print out c.getOrganizationName. So I'm just going to print out the name of every school that's in my list. Notice I used a for each loop here to loop through the new array list that I retrieved back from the method getStateSchools. All right, let's see what happens when I run this. Okay, so here's my college data analysis. The college with the largest student population, according to that data file in the year 2022, was Penn State University. It was ranked number 323. If you'll notice, about halfway down has total students, 102,826. So that makes that the largest student population from all of the universities in that particular list of colleges. Let's keep going. So, here's my average student to faculty ratio of public colleges in the Northeast. It looks like it's 15.72727272. And then the average student to faculty ratio of public colleges in the South was 19.412. So it looks like, according to this data, that the public colleges in the Northeast region have a slightly smaller faculty or student to faculty ratio than the public colleges in the South. Do with that information what you will. And then finally, I listed the colleges that were located in Florida, and you'll notice it starts off the University of Florida, Florida State University, University of Miami, and then all the way down to Gulf Coast University, New College of Florida, and Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, the worldwide, the online version of that as well too. And there we have it. All right. So today we developed code for some standard and original algorithms for a particular context that involved ArrayList, and we determined the results of these algorithms. Specifically, we found the largest element in an ArrayList. We found both the sum and average of values in an ArrayList, and we determined which elements of an ArrayList had a particular value. And we'll do more algorithms in our next video. All right, so that's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget to hit that like button. Please subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you next time. Take care.